Hey, hello there, and thanks for watching the 2020 Social Justice Center Jubilee. I'm Scott Gordon with Tone Madison, tonemadison.com, and we're really happy to be part of this event. And we've got a few things that are happening in between the music. Right now, I'm going to be talking with Ilana Bryne, who is a DJ and producer based here in Madison. Behind me, you can see the cover art from her debut EP, which was called Low Earth Orbit and came out on a label from Portugal called Naive. And since then, Ilana has put out a couple more things, and we're going to talk about those, and I'll just get into it. Ilana, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
So, I guess what I wanted to start with was the Low Earth Orbit EP had a whole variety of styles going on. You had elements of drum and bass and jungle and breakbeats and whatnot, and you were combining that with elements obviously from techno and house. But the last couple of EPs, I think it's fair to say, are pretty focused on house tracks, and there's still variety to them obviously, but you're focusing really overtly on that. So I wondered if you could start by talking about each of those recent releases and what you were trying to do with each of them.
Yeah, I mean, you're right about the elements of drum and bass in the first release. I'm a little older than I think a lot of the people that, certainly my label mates, as well as a lot of the people that I interact with in dance music and club culture right now. I'm 43, and that means I'm old enough to have been around in the 90s during, the original, I guess, the golden era of jungle and drum and bass, and hardcore before it. I know and love breakbeats. So when I was working on Low Earth Orbit EP, it was a case of me hearing, producers like Violet and others on Naive, as well as other people from various, corners of the dance music universe, Object, and others, doing, these breaks inspired things and little jungle flavors here and there. And I was like, well, they're doing some really good music, but I'm not hearing the elements of jungle that I really like, that I feel nostalgia for, but initially drew me to jungle in the 90s, and the heavy bass lines, the vocal samples, the concept of the drop, which I think in this day has been kind of, I have to say, unfortunately, kind of stolen by like the cheesy dubstep sort of thing, like like that's got the spirit, but really not the execution of what it's all about. It's like, you want it to like build and then drop, and it just blows your mind. And so yeah, Dubbox Medicine, which was like the jungliest track off of Low Earth Orbit, was me trying to do my contribution to that sort of the saturation of techno and house with little jungly elements, and I think it turned out pretty well. But that said, I quickly burnt out on it, the breakbeat part of it, the jungle part of it, and it's not for disliking that. It's just that I've done that. I've lived through that, and I don't want to play with that sort of throwback sound as much anymore. Like, I want to do my own thing. And I certainly didn't want to find myself pigeonholed as yet another like okay, she can do break beats. Great. What else can she do? Yeah, so when I was getting together tracks for the new EP on Naive, there was exclusive. Can I swear on this?
Oh yeah.
Okay, just checking. Exclusive Shit Holds No Weight, which was like the big anthem off of the EP, does, it has a breakbeat in it, but it's fed through some filters and it's more towards the background. But I was going for more of I wanted to kind of capture what I heard people like Carl Craig and Gemini doing in the 90s and beyond, as far as kind of quirky but funky. It's techno, it's house, but it's not so simple. Like it could go a lot of different directions. Five Magazine out of Chicago was so sweet. They actually were the first ones to say, hey, this kind of reminds me of Spencer Kinsey of Gemini, who's a big idol of mine. So that was a nice result.
Yeah, and that's a track off of Strange Adventure, which is your second release for Naive.
That's right.
Not counting various remixes and compilation tracks that you had for them. And then you have another EP that you just put out recently called Ivy Volume 1, and that was sort of a self-release on this new label you have called Shebco Sounds, which I want to talk about that. But in your liner notes to that on Bandcamp, you kind of say, like, use this however you will. You can treat it more as tools within a bigger mix or as standalone tracks. What is it? It's kind of up to the listener. And I was wondering about the difference in concepts between these two EPs that are both very focused on, like, here's some house bangers, but each take a very different approach.
Yeah, so if you listen to, like, the difference between the stuff I've put out on Naive, which I think tends to be pretty varied in terms of the style of each track, though certainly with some connective tissue among them. But the tracks I've done on Naive have been pretty polished, pretty, like, they can stand alone as songs pretty easily. And when I was sitting down and thinking about what I wanted to do with that first EP for Shebco, I had been revisiting a bunch of this very, I feel it's a very distinct Chicago sound. Sometimes it was called the basement sound due to, like, I don't know whether it was basement house parties or it was just like basement studios that were literally just a MPC sampler and a crappy sound setup and, just working with samples. But it was simple, it was quick. It wasn't trying to, make a statement as such. But it's not simple music. There's a technique involved that's very focused on grit and groove and funk. And so it was my sort of take to, like, I want to do as many tracks as possible of, like, they're all the same tempo, they're all the same length, they all have basically the same, like, container as far as the way I mixed and mastered them. So it was born out of an experiment of, like, how many tracks can I make in a weekend? And I got like 15 out of it, and the 6 that I released were the ones that I felt really worked best. And yeah, I still think there's some variety between them, whether it's a filtered disco loop or more of a stompy sort of bit. There's one that works with the classic percolator quirky little synth sound. Like it's a love letter to that, 90s Chicago sound of Relief Records, Dance Mania, just banging tunes. Yeah.
And like I said, that's the first release on a label that you're starting called Shebco Sounds. And I want to hear more about what you're hoping to do with that and how you ended up naming it. Because I know you're a native of Sheboygan, and we've talked about this before. And I think your cover photo on Twitter right now is like a New York Times headline about the meat that made Sheboygan famous or something like that.
That's my aspiration. I want to be the meat that made Sheboygan famous. Jackie Mason has had that title for too long. Not that he lived there very long, but he was born there. And I suppose some sports people were born there, but what do I know about that? Anyway, yeah, Shebco. So, I mean, like, I think it's probably safe to say that everyone who puts out a record at one point or another gets it in their head that, hey, I would like to have a label to put out my own stuff. And with things like Bandcamp available now, it's easier than ever. For me, it was just a question of confidence of like, because I had spent so much time polishing a lot of the stuff that I put out for Naive, I was like, can I get away with anything less than, that attention to detail? Turns out I can. I mean, it's my vision for the label is kind of like, it's not entirely just based on whim, but it's definitely like, I am not going to lose sleep over whether it's perfectly mastered. I'm not going to lose sleep over whether my production skills are on the same level as fill in the blank, I'm not trying to compete with, well, anyone really. I just want to have an outlet. And it's really a question of self-motivation. Can I, get stuff together and actually get it out every other month or whatever? Yeah, as far as like Sheboygan, and the correct term for a native of Sheboygan is Sheboyganite. Sheboyganite is when I was trying to come up with a name, I went through all these terrible names that had things like Jack and Tracks and whatever, all these cliches of house music. And they were cliches, and I hated them. And I was like, and I got so far as designing logos and stuff. And I was like, this just isn't true to who I am, like, yes, I know and love the music, but I'm not from Southside Chicago. Like, the hell do I know about that life apart from the music I've heard and the, people I've interacted with. And I was like, how do I not repeat some of the grosser steps that I've seen from people like, Mark Hawkins, British producer, white guy, released a EP or an LP as Marquise Hawkins. Name of the LP, Cabrini Green. Like, what the hell does he know about Cabrini Green? Then there's actually a really good NPR podcast. Code Switch is the name of the podcast, and the name of the episode is something like "Hello DJ Blackface" or "Give It Up for DJ Blackface," and it's all about this trend. There are other DJs, the Black Madonna, who, for example, is someone who supported me a lot early in my career. And she's a good DJ and she's clearly talented and stuff, but she has this super problematic name for a white woman. And people have told her again and again, Black people, people of color, white friends have told her, you got to change the name. And she's got her reasons for having it and she won't budge. But I was like, I don't want to be that. I don't want to have any question of who I am and where I'm coming from. So Sheboygan, or Sheboygan County, Shebco as we call it. The alliteration is great. Shebco Sounds. I came up with a logo that I liked, and I was just like, this is fun. Like it's not pretending to be anything it's not. And it's there's no pressure to be pretentious or front, as a person as old as myself who's been into rap for decades would say. No fronting.
Especially in a country where most of popular culture is just wholesale ripped from the work of Black artists.
For real, yeah.
There's this weird fine line between wanting to celebrate and participate in the music and kind of helping yourself to a cultural language or cachet that is not yours. And I imagine that's an interesting line to walk as an electronic music artist.
Absolutely. And I feel like I've done a lot of solid work in terms of supporting and promoting the originators, of being a bit of a historian and not letting people forget where it came from, and of supporting the next generation. Shout out to all the Make Techno Black Again techno Twitter crew. Let's have another argument with somebody tomorrow. This is how I spend my days. But I was like, I need to. One of my personal projects lately is taking it to the next level. Like, okay, it's one thing to bitch and moan on Twitter about these things, and hopefully, hold someone accountable. Though, as anyone who's actually been through it, cancel culture is easily revealed to be kind of toothless. But I want to start bringing this conversation up again and again until my fellow white people that are like biting all this Black music and not being good house guests, so to speak, not being respectful. I need them to not be able to escape the message of, okay, what are you doing and why are you doing it? And maybe you need to stop. And that's on me. That's not on, Black folks in techno and house have been having that conversation, holding those arguments for a long time now. And it's time for white people in techno, house, dance music, whatever, to step up. And so I'm trying to figure out how I can best do that.
Yeah, and you have this role in the electronic music world where you're something of a force on Twitter in this really specific way.
Apparently, yeah.
Which I know is something that you've joked about, but clearly it's an important way for you to connect with people and talk with people.
Yeah. I mean, I want to help maintain the energy I see from white people who would try to be allies. I want to help maintain that energy of supporting and educating and taking it further. And so I hope that I serve as an example to someone who's maybe half my age and who's getting into this and like doesn't know, because at 21 I loved house music, I loved techno, I loved jungle. What the hell did I know about the history of that stuff, though? And I mean, granted, the internet was a lot smaller, a lot younger back then. It wasn't as easy to just go digging for resources. So it's like, now that the communication avenues are there. It's time to build those archives. It's time to uh, confront and engage with people so that we can educate them.
Yeah, and you make an interesting point. Like, in some senses, maybe it's better to be your age when you first get access to a larger platform, because you had time to digest the music and the politics around it and just learn more about who you are as a person. And kind of like you were saying, oftentimes somebody in their early 20s isn't necessarily going to have that. And especially if you give them a bigger platform, that can become problematic in all sorts of ways.
Definitely. And I think that, I'm just remember, so at that age, I was a jungle DJ and I thought I knew everything. And I was a gatekeeper of the real jungle, not the watered down shit that was, a lot of the US producers were playing or trying to make or whatever. There's no true believer like a young true believer, I guess. And yeah, it's not that I feel any differently in terms of those truths of, like, first and foremost, this is Black music from Black artists, and I'm a guest in this house, and I need to carry myself accordingly. Um, but I'm also not as blunt. I think a lot of younger, I feel weird saying this, younger folks on the internet um, often they either don't know when to pick their battles, or they are like a bull in a china shop, just smashing everything around them, trying to strike out and fix the world as they think it needs to be fixed and stuff like that. And yeah, hopefully I'm modeling something that's introspective, but also passionate, um, and um, and deeply curious and willing to listen. That I'm so happy to see uh, academics like DeForest Brown. His name might be longer than that, so my apologies if he hears this and I didn't get it quite right. Has been doing some incredible, like, speaking on panels, and I believe he has a book out, or it has a book coming out. Just deep, considered, like, Black intellectual discourse that I'm grateful and lucky enough to be privy to, and trying to take that and then use that to um, echo and amplify it. Yeah.
And I wanted to get back to the Strange Adventure EP for a minute.
Yeah.
You've got a remix on there from Russell E.L. Butler, who is a great producer and DJ
They
from
are,
Oakland.
yeah.
And I wanted to hear a little bit more about the original track and what you thought they brought to it in their remix.
Yeah. Russell's remix is what, the Booty remixer. I'm probably getting the title not quite right, but like my original was, I wanted it to be smooth, even a little glossy. I wanted it to sound sophisticated. I wanted, like, one of the earliest tracks that got played in strip clubs is this tune by a number of names, Charivari, or Charivari. I don't know. They say it both ways in the song, but it was this sort of, it's got like this typical early 80s electro sound, and then a sort of dispassionate voice, male voice, talking about this very cool European guy, smoking on his cigarette, listening to his car cassette. It's, but it was this idea of like European cool meets Black American cool. And I was thinking a lot about that when I made oh my god, I'm blanking on the title. Which song are we talking about?
Why am I spacing on this? I think it's, what is it? Theoretical medical genitals?
Yes.
Is that it?
Yes.
Okay. I always have huge brain farts about song titles in particular, which is a big problem to have when you're trying to like cover music stuff.
Well, fair enough. And you know what? Like the a little secret about a lot of, I think this is true of a lot of techno releases and house releases and whatever, is that the titles don't necessarily get assigned to them until they need to be released. So you don't necessarily think about them in terms of, oh, this is title, right? This is that song that sounds like this. And oh yeah, I gave it this name. Anyway, Theoretical Medical Genitals, which is taken from a Jay Smooth podcast. Check out Jay Smooth if you don't know Jay Smooth. He's amazing. But yeah, I wanted this really like kind of sophisticated dance floor sound. So then to have Russell take it and turn up the tempo, give it that thick, kick drum, and just kind of give it some shift and shake and stuff. That was great. I was so glad with what they did with it. It was, it wasn't an entirely different song, but Russell made it their own for sure.
So what do you have planned for the near future, and what are some things that you'd like to explore going forward?
For myself, I have, excuse me, I have the next few Shebco Sound releases pretty much decided upon. This is one of the other advantages of having your own label, is you can go through like the directory of all the songs you've been working on and be like, oh wow, I've actually got 10 releases worth ready to go here. It's a nice feeling. So yeah, I've got more coming in that regard, and I think that I'll probably continue to do themed releases. Not necessarily the same experiment style that I did with the first release, where it was all same tempo, all same sort of vibe, but I think that I will probably try to do something like, okay, this next release will all be, a little slower, deeper house music, more melodic, that sort of thing. Maybe I'll do one that's a bit more jazzy. Maybe I'll do one that's a bit more, gets away from the straight 4/4 kick on the kick drum end of things and gets into like a little live sounding drums, but not necessarily like a straight up break beat. So I think that's where I'll go with Shebco. I'm thinking about doing another label for more electro and techno oriented stuff, less organic sounding, less Chicago sounding stuff. Though I haven't decided on a name for that yet. So we'll see what happens with that. I know I've got a couple of remixes coming up. One that will be on Naive, I hope, later this summer. It's going to be, I don't know. It's I tried to go for a different sound than what I'm used to doing. It reminds me of 90s raves and what was then called funky breaks. It's just got this very Florida was big on it, and the West Coast was big on it, but it's just kind of a chunky break beat, heavy bass line, and almost trancey synths. So not my normal fare, but a hell of a lot of fun to make, and I think that'll come out later this summer. But beyond that, yeah, a couple more remix projects going on that are to be determined as far as release dates, and I'm not really going to say more than that because I'm not sure what's going on with them. I'd love to do more remixes. I really like reinterpreting. Yeah, so we'll see. It's an exciting time. I 3 years ago, I never would have thought that I would feel this prolific. So it's really quite pleasant too. Quite pleasant. That sounds so toothless. It's fucking awesome to have this much musical output going on.
And where can people follow you and find your stuff? I know 2 of the EPs are on the Naive Bandcamp app.
Yeah.
Which, is it naivetracks.bandcamp?
It's Naive Tracks.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So the word naive and the TRAX.
Okay.
All one word.
And then Shebco is at?
Shebco.bandcamp.com. So
okay.
SHEBCO.bandcamp.com. I mean, it's all under my name. So if you search my name, which, people will probably misspell because they always do, you'll find me pretty quickly, but ILANABRYNE. And note the last name is Bryne, not Byrne. So the R and the Y are switched.
And you're also on Twitter, so.
Of course, same name.
Just Ilana Bryne, because you had a different handle for a while, and
I did.
I always get mixed up.
Yeah, I did, and I don't know what it was exactly that made me decide to just start using my real name, but I've got a pretty unique name. I think that was partially it. It was that I knew I was going to be releasing music under my own name, so why not just use that for my Twitter handle? And if somebody wants to dox me, I'm easy to find. But joke's on you, I don't have any dark secrets.
And you're always very insightful and funny on Twitter, so I appreciate that.
I've been called a rave Twitter linchpin by an esteemed large publication that I won't name. But yes, apparently I'm well received, and I guess I'm grateful for that. I think it's very funny.
And you've also been called, quote, a woman from Wisconsin.
I am indeed a woman from Wisconsin. I was born in Madison and I grew up in Sheboygan, so by definition, I fit that descriptor.
It was just a funny way to sum someone up.
I think so.
Well, Ilana Bryne, thank you so much for taking the time, and thanks to everyone out there who's watching this.
Thank you for having me, Scott. It's been a pleasure.